Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast, aka CTP, in association with thelibertybeacon.com, and I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show! Greetings, everyone. This episode is for the people who like to break things. Now, of course, I don't literally mean people wanting to run around and smash a bunch of dishes or anything like that. I'm talking in a somewhat figurative sense in that I'm going to break my rules. Normally, this show is in conjunction and correlates and corresponds with thelibertybeacon.com each week. Well, for this week, yes, we're still doing that. This episode is about quotations. Some really smart people once said some things, and I want to share them. On thelibertybeacon.com, however, these quotations take up so much space, they are actually going to be part of my ChristiTutionalist Politics Part 2 book, still slated. Hopefully, plans sometimes run into problems, but as it stands now, I'm still looking to drop CTP2 June 1st of 2024, and there will be Chapter 2 as it's planned right now, Quotations Some Really Smart People Once Said. On thelibertybeacon.com, because there's so many quotes, this will be a Part 1 and Part 2. So next week, however, the CTP show will break the pattern, will break the mold, while TLB will have Part 2 next week, continuing quotations, and I won't share all of them here. There are way too many to go into, would take way too long. Not the point. Part of the point is this is a tease about what's coming in the CTP2 book, but TLB next week will be Part 2 of quotations. Next week, I'm going to break my rule, break my mold, break my pattern, and I will be discussing an older TLB piece, too, actually, that was a Part 1 and Part 2, about twisting and warping of language by the left, because they're at it again, talking about now they're no longer illegal aliens. Nope. No longer illegal immigrants. Nope. They're just immigrants. Nope. They're migrants. Nope. Now they're newcomers. I'm not going to go any further into what next week's show then will go into other than that tease. So let me read part of the opening of the quotations chapter. Yes, there are way too many people who have said some really great comments to quote here. I wanted to briefly share just a few that relate to ChristiTutionalist politics in some form or another here. Some to provoke thought, while others inspire or motivate to action, as this book is both intended to do. If you read the original CTP book, you've seen some of these, others not mentioned in the original CTP 1 book, also below. Some quotes will be very familiar, while others here from off the beaten path that are equally important, but many people have not heard or are certainly less quoted. Of course, one could write an entire book, thousands of pages long, or even an entire encyclopedia of books, if you remember the Encyclopedia Britannica. Well, at my sister's house, who lived in with my mother who had dementia for a while, passed in 2022. There's still a full set of Encyclopedia Britannicas from like the 1980s in the basement over there. I don't know what we're going to do with them, but that's an aside. Encyclopedia books, all hundreds, thousands of pages in themselves, packed with just quotes that relate to one another to make points, but I'll leave that book or that set for someone else to produce. For now, sharing these several, in my opinion, very important quotes, bolstering points previously made in ChristiTutionalist Politics, the original book, and preview foreshadow where we're going in this edition titled ChristiTutionalist Politics 2. First and foremost, as this book mainly, but not exclusively, for Christians, and about the point that we must act and not just expect things to be as we wish them. Ye shall be known by your fruits, not your empty rhetoric, right? God, fruits, deeds, results, your actions, what you're actually reaped from what you sowed, not coulda, woulda, shoulda, not your but my intentions were or I hope for good cop-out, not just I prayed and left it all up to for God, right? As we're given free will and commandments like to be our brother's keeper, which is a personal commandment for us to act upon, not render that unto Caesar. Jesus was not a socialist. This is not about rendering brother's keeper unto Caesar to then steal from Steve to give to Eve for Eve to then help John across the street so that Eve feels good, like she actually did something when she didn't. Not this, I prayed and gave it all to God, right? Free will, we are to act on the commandments given to us, not on just how to behave, but calls to act, to protect, preserve, be productive for and in Christ's names. So the first quote I've put into the quotations chapter is from 1 Timothy 1:13. When I went unto Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some that they teach no other doctrine. Put no other God before me, and the doctrine of the Bible. ChristiTutionalist Politics is all about that. The Bible, the whole Bible, in full context. Teaching bits and pieces distorted out of context is an earthly, worldly, other doctrine agenda. So that's an important quote to start with. And next, from POTUS 45, Trump, in America, we don't worship government, we worship God. In response to Biden saying, put trust and faith in our government. And as I've been saying for years, liberals, although I need to correct that, leftists, real faith is only in government. Their motto, separation from church to state, as opposed to what Jefferson was really talking about in his letter, separation of church and state, is not in our founding documents. The left twists and distorts the Jefferson letter. Freedom is a fragile thing, and is never more than one generation away from an extinction. It is not ours by inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. Those who have known freedom, then lost it, have never known it again. The Gipper, Ronald Reagan, who also said, if fascism ever comes to America, it will come in the form of liberalism. Now, I know while we quote Ronald Reagan on that, he is actually paraphrasing someone else, though I don't know who it was he was quoting during an interview that he paraphrased it from. I haven't been able to find that. So we still attribute that to Ronald Reagan, even though technically he was paraphrasing it from someone else. And I'll get into that later about the Claudine Gay plagiarism situation where she didn't bother to put pieces that she stole, she lifted, she claimed them as her own rather than putting them in quotations and providing a citation. In this case, we don't know exactly who Reagan was paraphrasing there to be able to give them a partial accreditation or citation for that. So this quote is provided in earnest as to who we know. I'm directly quoting Reagan having said it, but acknowledging fully someone else has said it. That could be true of other quotations. We know whom we're quoting. To the best of our ability, they are the person we believe originated it, but it could have originated from somewhere else. But the best of my ability, I'm providing quotes with the proper accreditation and citations as best as I can. To follow up the fascism thing, because communism, all leftist paradigms, the left-right political spectrum paradigm, to the left, more absolute power control. To the right, anarchy. Now, I want to make a point about anarchy, though. No government. Antifa and blackline Marxists use the anarchist symbol, but they're not anarchists, they're fascists. They want full tyrannical top-down federal government, but they use the anarchist symbol based upon its Russian roots, but not in the earnest sense of they want less or no government, but for the Russian ties and their eventual love, the evolution to Russian communism, to them that it represents, not anarchism itself. So I just wanted to clear that up. But in response to people inquiring why Norman Mattoon Thomas was no longer going to run for president in the United States after doing so 6 times for the Socialist Party of America, he stated in a 1944 speech, "The American people will never knowingly adopt socialism, but under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until one day America will be a socialist nation without knowing how it happened." That's an important quote, because that's what we see today. That's what Reagan warned about regarding fascism. Again, as if communism, fascism, socialism was any different these days. This isn't the 1930s with the 1930 German Nazi Socies fighting the Moscow-backed Leninist Marxist communists. There was a slight difference then. There's even less of a difference now. In today's sense, they're all the same. They have the same goal. It's just whether it's the rainbow flag banner of the fascocrats or the red hammer and sickle banner of the Marxist Russian-backed communists of today, or your run-of-the-mill general socialists, they all believe in the same thing: power, control over everybody, federal tyranny, top-down, and yes, globalist one-world government. They just want their banner to be the one flying over the world government. They just want them to be the ruling elites, ruling and lording over you. These morons running around in the streets supporting these different groups, somehow thinking they're going to get to be part of the ruling elites, and on the inside, the ones who get to have when everybody else have not become peasants are useful idiots, of course. So there's no real difference in those systems today. Fascism is about controlling corporate entities, small businesses even, dictating your life through government top-down federal regulations. How is that any different than a communist socialist insisting that the party, the fascocrats party, the U.S. government directly own the corporation and control the board of directors? There's no real difference there. The board, supposedly private now, still has to follow the federal regulation edicts and dictates. The fascist dictates. So there is no difference in those things today. Just a different banner, just one party's ruling elites rather than another's. It's all the same goal, just minor differences. Excuse me, I got to pull a Marco Rubio and take a drink. I'm feeling extra dry today. So good, so good, so good. Pure bottled water. I've broken away. I know in the past, this is an aside, I've joked about my soda stream unit, and my doctors, due to issues with kidney and liver and my health overall, they want me no syrups, no caffeine, no added sugar. So yeah, if you're viewing behind the scenes sneak peek video, you see me holding up the Our Family Spring Water from Jerry's Foods, the local market up the street. At any rate, that was an aside, a little bit of an update on my health woes. Another quote from Samuel Adams: "If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude than the animated contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were ever our countrymen." Amen, Samuel Adams. We're seeing that today with those who want to enslave themselves. They long for the shackles of handouts and being able to just get by. Be consumed, have a roof over their head, enough food for their bellies so that they can engage in the bread and circus, which I've written about and we've talked about recently. They want the change. They want the tyranny, just as long as they have enough just to get by, as if the only meaning in life were to be able to coast through life and just get by, rather than the dangers of real freedom, at which Ben Franklin talked about with a republic, if you can keep it. Real freedoms, your chance at a meritocracy to grow and obtain and really live a life that you want to be forced to skate and get by and not really gain any enjoyment from life. One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by inferiors. An important quote from Plato. And another, Ben Franklin: "Those who are willing to trade freedom for security deserve neither." Right? And talking about liberty, Thomas Jefferson: "Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. Our nation is founded on individual rights, and personal responsibility. We've talked before about the Bradford colony and the failure of communism here on our own soil. The Commie Mayflower Compact, a commonwealth where no one owned anything. It was all a collective, and they nearly starved to death. Bradford instituted then private property ownership, free markets, personal freedoms, individual rights, as long as you didn't trample on another person's individual rights and freedoms, the ability for yourself to excel and force those. It is biblical that there is a difference between those unable to do for themselves and those unwilling to do for themselves. We are to take care of those who are unable to do for themselves.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Ed Bondarenka, and I host Your American Heritage on Saturdays at 2 in the afternoon on this station. Your American Heritage is a show about the struggle we find ourselves in and how to react to it in the light of our biblical and American heritage. Listen to it while you're working around the house, the garage, cleaning the guns, walking the dog, driving, or just lazing around. Join me at 2 o'clock Saturdays here on Wham Radio, 1600 AM, 92.7 FM.
God bless America.
And Paul Harvey would say, now you know the rest of the story. And as the old saying goes, the rest is history. After Bradford pivoted, and I like to say, I think Ayn Rand got a bit of her idea for Atlas Shrugged from Bradford, the colony there. The obedient always think of themselves as virtuous rather than cowardly. Oh, is that a great quote from Robert Anton Wilson about self-justification for idleness. I'm going to skip ahead here because, again, it would take hours to read all of these quotes. I just want to share a few of them so that you go to thelibertybeacon.com and read the part 1 and part 2 of the quotes. And or, of course, please consider buying ChristiTutionalist Politics 2, the book that will be coming June of 2024, that will have more than this show or the part 1 and part 2 of the libertybeacon.com pieces. It's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Very important quote from Aristotle. I talk all the time. I deal in the good, the bad, the ugly, the pros and the cons, presenting at times a devil's advocate point of the other view. You can't refute someone's viewpoint if you don't understand or at least attempt to understand what they are saying. Our arguments become better if we occasionally watch CNN or the MSNBCs, as I call them, to know what they're saying. You've got to know what they're saying to be able to present an intelligent, logic and reason-based rebuttal of them. And speaking of MSNBCs, another Aristotle quote is, a fool contributes nothing worth hearing and takes offense at everything. Well, isn't that today's left in a nutshell? That part, contributes nothing worth hearing. Well, it may not be worth hearing, but again, we need to, on occasion, understand and hear what the enemy is saying. You can't counter it if you don't know it. A George Carlin quote. I know people love to put George Carlin memes up on the internet. So tyrannical governments don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. That is against their interest. They want obedient workers, people who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept it. Well, doesn't that explain why the Department of Education was created by Jimmy Carter to reward the teachers' unions, and us going from the best educated on the planet to now like 49th on the planet, the dumbing down of America? If you don't know history, if you can't do basic math, you are dependent on others. They don't teach economics. They want you to read Paul Krugman, communist propaganda spin economics, not how economies actually work, and how, like Bono of U2, finally, a kind of a Bernie bro before Bernie really came along, a full-on socialist, Marxist, communist lover. Bono, during the G.W. Bush age, finally woke up when G.W. Bush got him involved with aid to Africa and realized, indeed, the old give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, or as the Democrats like to see it, the fascocrats, give a man somebody else's fish and he'll vote for you. You creating dependency. Bono finally woke up to the fact that you teach people how to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, give them a skill, even if it's just basket weaving, to then be able to sell baskets to other people who need them to put bread they're baking in to sell to others. Capitalism has lifted more people from poverty than any other system on the planet. You then create an economy for them where they become self-sustaining. They grow, they need help, they hire people, which then helps those people. You create a market system for them to help themselves rather than creating them dependent upon handouts all the time. So that's an important quote, both from George Carlin there and understanding how even Bono, a commie, woke up finally. Some liberals can be reached, like a Brandon Strzok or a Candace Owens or a Tammy Bruce, or he was just on Gutfeld the other day. He's always teased about looking like he's 16 years old. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Some liberals are reachable. A leftist ideologue never is. George Orwell, of course, is quoted often and needs to be quoted. I quote him in my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book. I talk about Animal Farm and how if George Orwell were alive today and writing a sequel to Animal Farm, the line would be, because the left always talks about equity, 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 which means everybody poor except the ruling elites. Whereas in our system, more people through merit and work can lift themselves up. But George Orwell, it's not, to the book Terror Strikes. I say if Orwell were alive today, he would write a sequel to Animal Farm, and the line would be, some animals get more equity or special privileges, special rights than other animals, rather than equal rights and equal opportunity. Thomas Sowell, love him. A quick quote from him: there is nothing that politicians like better than handing out benefits to be paid for someone else. Going back to that improper allocation of render under Caesar out of context. Jesus was not a socialist. Being your brother's keeper does not mean let the government steal from Steve to give to Eve to help John. That is redistribution, communism, socialism. That is not your personal commandment to be your brother's keeper. So that's important right there. I could go on and on and on. Of course, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. We all know that from Martin Luther King Jr., and that's an important quote because why? Affirmative action struck down by the courts again. Some people peddling racism still today. Even worse, the left is again attempting to resegregate society. They want black-only dorms, black-only graduations, Asian-only this, white-only that. Well, you can't have a white-only anything, of course. Oh, no. But mainly aimed at the black community to do what? Divide and conquer. Of course, that famous old quote. To try to create, as Candace Owens says, the new Democrat plantation, a new economic plantation. So they want to keep black people in chains, in dependency chains, a new form of slavery, a new plantation. And as I spelled Democrat when I don't call them fascocrats instead, DEMOKKKRATS, Democrats, just a new plantation. So thank you, Candace Owens, for your creation of Blexit and your contribution with that quote. If you've been voting for politicians who promise to give you goodies at someone else's expense, because nothing is free, then you have no right to complain when they take your money and give it to somebody else, including themselves, cashing in on their government service. Another Thomas Sowell quote. Ultimately, government is whatever the people in power can get away with and whatever the people they govern will tolerate. Thomas Massey. I have in ChristiTutionalist Politics, the book, the first part, the only thing required for evil prevail is good peoples do nothing. We all know that quote also. And this Thomas Massey is playing off that. The only thing required for evil prevail, good people do nothing. If you do nothing, indeed, as Thomas Massey says, ultimately, government is whatever the people in power can get away with, and whatever the people they govern will tolerate. We, the people, we are at fault for allowing this government to get as out of control as it has, and if we don't rein it back in, how much further it will get. Also, regarding socialism and the dependency from Rush Limbaugh, liberals measure compassion by how many people are given welfare. Conservatives measure compassion by how many people no longer need it. How many people, as Bono discovered through markets and capitalism, lifting people up, no longer need the handouts, are no longer dependent on others. An odd quote from Bill Maher I'll share. If kids knew what they wanted to be at age 8, the world would be filled with cowboys and Indians. I wanted to be a pirate. Thank God nobody took me seriously and scheduled me for eye removal and peg leg surgery. Now, why am I quoting Bill Maher? Because I talked about him in the Gray Areas Part 2 episode. He's still an ultra-leftist. He says some occasional good things, but that quote is indeed a good one. And the point, you do not allow 10, 12-year-olds to say, I think I'm a different gender, and have someone chop off their body part. They're not ready to make adult decisions. That's why if you want to do something after age 18, you knock yourself out. As an adult, you get to make that decision. But in a nation of God-given rights, we still recognize children do not have fully evolved brains. And in fact, science now says the brain really isn't even remotely fully evolved until like age 24. So rather than lowering the Voting Rights Act age to 16 like the left wants, because kids don't know anything, they're in the indoctrination factories, they can be fooled and tricked and easily manipulated in voting for fascocrats. We should probably really raise the voting age to 24 when your brain's actually fully developed and you've had time to experience some life on your own and for yourself. But that, again, is another aside. But you can see why I am quoting these things and these various different people to hopefully spur these thoughts in you. Here's one from Socrates. I know you won't believe me, but the highest form of human excellence is to question oneself and others. That's important. It's biblical also, because why? Hubris, pride. You need to be able to question oneself as well as others. We are all human. We are all frail. We are all capable of making mistakes, committing error. We must recognize that, put aside our pride, and recognize that last part. The highest form of human excellence is to question oneself and others. Very important. G.K. Chesterton. Tolerance is the virtue of a man without convictions. Does that not say it all there? It needs no further clarification, and you can see why I feel so many of these quotes are important. Karl Marx, since we've talked about socialism and communism, let's quote Karl Marx. It's important. Again, Hitler was Time Magazine's Man of the Year, not because he was someone to be lauded or to look up to, but because he was the man most affecting things at that time that he was named Man of the Year. It is equally important to them to recognize good and evil in their mind back when Time Magazine actually made sense and were, run by actual journalists. They did the right thing, in a sense, naming Hitler Man of the Year. Again, not as a matter of praise, but as a matter of he's important. You either support him or oppose him, but regardless, you must deal with this man in one way, shape, or form, just as we still have to deal with Karl Marx because of all the Marxist-Leninist idiots running around today that didn't learn the Bradford colony history and how it failed here and doesn't learn any history in school because the left doesn't want them learning anything, because if you understand history, you understand communism, socialism, fascism fails every time, every place it's tried. Karl Marx, in his own words, my objective in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. And a lot of useful idiots running around today doing the same thing, even some fake Christians that believe in the redistribution that, again, Jesus was not a socialist. It is our personal commandment. I know I'm repeating this again. I've repeated it in other shows and other online pieces, but it's important to hammer it home over and over and over again. Jesus was not a socialist. Your commandment to be your brother's keeper is a personal one. And why we as Christians are to engage in charity and understanding the difference between those unable to do for themselves versus those unwilling to do for themselves. That's why charity is supposed to be local. That's why our government was founded on the principle of that which closest to the people is the best governance, because the local people know the difference between those unable to do and those who are just unwilling and just want to ride in the cart while the rest of us pull them around in the cart when they're more than capable of doing for themselves, but do not do for themselves. The Bible again, Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. An obvious, important quote from the Bible to add to these quotations of great peoples that have spoken some great quotes that we're sharing here. I'm starting to get up there in time. I'm scrolling through my chapter literally on the laptop as the current rough draft exists for ChristiTutionalist Politics, Part 2, the book. Let me quote a more lighthearted one, but important. Rush, the Canadian rock trio, not Rush Limbaugh, the famous conservative talk show host. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, right? Oh, that is biblical without being from a biblical scholar. That is right. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice to allow others to dictate upon you what you can or can't do. So not choosing to be involved in politics, you're allowing the tyranny, and you're not only letting yourself down, you're letting down your other fellow Americans who don't deserve the boot of tyranny upon their throat that you're allowing to usher in by your complacency. You're sitting around. And I've written occasional distractions, not just okay, but healthy. And we did the God and Guns plus Sports show where we talked about that. You know, occasional distractions are good. You know, I love watching the NHL hockey games. The problem is if you're consumed by the bread and circus 24/7, all the time, that is the problem. But back to the Rush rock group quote. So get off your butt, I add. Pick a side. Be involved. Also, Rush the group. Show, don't tell. I've heard it all before. Don't care what you say. Show me, don't tell me. Pardon, I used to write and record music. I used to have a reasonable voice, but I dare not try to imitate Geddy Lee's voice here now and sing it. My singing is horrible these days. That's why I stick to writing books. But yeah, show me, don't tell me. Again, biblical actions, not empty rhetoric and meaningless and worthless online whining virtue signaling as you shall be known by your fruits. How many times does that need to be repeated? And Charlotte Bronte from Jane Eyre, oh boy. Jane, yeah, Eyre. Yeah, I've never read that book. I know of the book, and now I'm screwing up the pronunciation, not even sure how it's supposed to be pronounced, but regarding freedom, an important quote from that book. I am no bird and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will. Important quote, because sadly, again, others prefer to put their own chains upon them. They're happy to be a caged bird as long as somebody cleans the cage and feeds them seed. They're happy with their little piece in the corner of the room of the planet. And that is so sad. I mentioned Ayn Rand, however you wish to pronounce her name. There is no difference between communism and socialism except in the means of achieving the same ultimate end. Communism proposes to enslave men by force, socialism by vote. It is merely the difference between murder and suicide. Thank you, Miss Rand, for that quote. You've heard me say that in other terms, right? There is no difference between communism, fascism, socialism. It's all, as she says, merely the difference between murder and suicide, the means of achieving the same ultimate end, I say the same goals. So that's an important. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I jokingly, well, before I go to that one too, because, you know, I like to be tongue-in-cheek at times. We've talked about the need to keep a sense of humor. Things are so darn serious. We have to be able to laugh, especially at ourselves, if we're to laugh at others, and to try to keep a sense of humor. But before that, one of the closing quotes that I go more lighthearted with, Salman Rushdie, if you recall, there's still a fatwa out on his life for writing the Satanic Verses book. He said, "What is freedom of expression? Without the freedom to offend, it ceases to exist." Very important quote about free speech. Now, as to that bit of fun quote at the end of the Quotations chapter, roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads. Which, of course, Doc Brown, as played by Christopher Lloyd in the Back to the Future movie, closing on a bit of fun because, remember, I always say, we'll go crazy if we cannot keep a sense of humor during these serious times. So again, I just wanted to pull very few of these quotes from history. Feel free to reach out to me via josephmleonard.us or terrorstrikes.info sites, the contact tab, to share your favorite quotes. Reach out to me. Who knows, if there is a CTP3 book, I might share some of those and give you a shout out, give a shout out to those who provided those quotes in a Quotations chapter of CTP3, if there is one. Lastly, I say in the Quotations chapter, let me say thank you to all my wonderful social media friends and readers of my Before It's News articles, as well as my The Liberty Beacon pieces, for some of your great suggestions for inclusion here in this book. However, I have not given anyone a shout out here. Like I said, if I do a CTP3 and you provide quotes, I'll give people a shout out and appreciation there. Let me repeat, though, I say at the conclusion, given the whole Claudine Gay and others caught in acts of plagiarism at Harvard fiasco, proper attribution is finally and rightly becoming a thing again. Therefore, afraid, I must add the following disclaimer. All quotes here in this manuscript or during this show or on the libertybeacon.com piece attributed citations to proper accreditation citation source, as if you're looking on the behind-the-scenes videos, you see me putting up the air quotes, best to research ability allowed. Obviously, some quotes are repeated or later paraphrased, as I talked about that one Reagan quote, and take on own new life by others. Sometimes the original source is lost in the process. If that is the case, my apologies. If any secondhand verbiage shared without ability by my best efforts to track down any and all proper original sources. I felt it important to close with that. So Claudine Gay kind of did us a favor and brought the notion of quotations and citations and attributions and the issues of plagiarism back to light. It's part of a free speech argument. I'm all for speech, but you don't get to steal someone else's words as your own. You can paraphrase, but it's still best to attribute and give a citation of whom it is you're paraphrasing. And if you've been a regular viewer of the show or of my thelibertybeacon.com pieces, you know recently I've shared an AI episode, the issues of morality and honesty of AI, the chat bot. Now, whether you can outline something and it'll spit a story back. Well, it is dishonest, in my opinion, to then try to use that as your own short story or build it into a novel. That is dishonest. The copyright laws need to change and update to deal with that new reality of our times. That, in my mind, is plagiarism. And chat GPTs, the chat bots, I should say in general, have been caught plagiarizing themselves. Because remember, these AI systems are coded by humans. They're only as good as what humans code them to do. Remember, as a former IT guy, the old GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So AI may make a good new research tool, but if they're quoting garbage, right, Reagan, speaking of quotes, once said, trust but verify. I avoid Google except for like shopping and things like that. For very serious things, I go to DuckDuckGo, Jibberoo, or FreeSpoke search engines who don't leftist mitigate results to present a leftist spin on things in the top results. So Google's great for shopping, but for serious searches, you should use DuckDuckGo, FreeSpoke, or Jibberoo. AI can be a great research tool, but like Wikipedia, a whole lot of garbage comes out of it. So you've got to be careful there. And these chatbots have been caught indeed pulling Claudine Gay plagiarisms, putting things in text as if it's the chatbot that came up with it when they're pulling somebody else's quote, but not giving it a proper attribution or citation. So please be original in your thoughts. Yes, use those for research, but in your writings, you need to be original. Be careful, beware, be wary of those who are cheating using these chatbots now to create material. With that, I will end it. Say thank you all for tuning in. And again, next week on thelibertybeacon.com will be Quotations Part 2. Next week, this show will break the formula and we'll go into twisting and warping of language back to previous TLB pieces. So there'll be a divergence of the formula there. Thank you all. Take care and God bless. Thank you for having tuned in for ChristiTutionalist Politics show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via terrorstrikes.info/shop. Be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come, but for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, no fancy high production intro or inserts, at least yet, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast and share episodes. We need your help to grow the show.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.